Good morning, everyone. Welcome for day 2 of the Canadian Gaming Summit. Glad you're all out to join us this morning. We have a very good program once again this morning and today. If you haven't bought your 50/50 tickets, you do have a little bit more time, because at the end of our keynote this morning, we will then move on to drawing that. And I'm told it may be close to $5,000. So, which is very good and a great effort for Project Share here in Niagara Falls, who's the beneficiary of the proceeds. Again, when I talked yesterday a lot about our industry and bringing people together, one of the things that through the summit, but also in work that CGA is doing, and this year the CGA board created a new affiliate membership category to extend CGA membership to regional and sector-specific associations that work for the betterment of our industry. And this is again recognized that many of our priorities and objectives overlap, and that by working collectively we can better achieve our goals. So I wanted to welcome actually the Gaming Securities Professionals of Canada, the Gaming Standards Association, and BC Gaming Industry Association, and the Commercial Gaming Association of Ontario as our first affiliate members, and we're looking forward to a great working relationship with those organizations. So I just wanted to thank them for their willingness and cooperation and the work we've had together over the years. And also our CGA membership continues to grow, and in the past month we welcomed the Covers Media Group with Covers.com, Unisync in the apparel sector, and Hard Rock Casinos as new members of the CGA. So I want to thank and a big shout out to them and for their commitment and willingness to be part of the CGA. This morning we have a fantastic speaker. The future of marketing from 4 Ps to 7 Ps and 15 Cs, and a framework for creating customer loyalty. And Stowe Shoemaker, who is the Dean of the William F. Harrah College of Hotel Administration at UNLV, is our speaker this morning, and a fantastic person. We've had a great opportunity to do work together and hopefully in betterment for our industry around education and training, and I look forward to that continued partnership. Prior to being named the Dean, Stowe has served as a Lindsay Professor at UNLV and a Donald Hubbs Distinguished Professor at the Conrad N. Hilton College of Hotel Administration at the University of Houston. For many years, he was a member of the Executive Education faculty at the Cornell University School of Hotel Administration. And throughout his career, Stowe has helped game developers test and market new games, both slot and table games, develop programs to measure customer satisfaction for casino and hotel firms, modeled the success and failure of marketing promotions. He has taught marketing as well as mathematics of casino games. He is currently helping write a strategic plan to bring healthcare tourism to Southern Nevada. Stowe has an extensive background in strategic pricing and revenue management and customer loyalty, and has conducted research in these areas as well as the hospitality and healthcare area. I think we're in for a great treat this morning, and I want to welcome Stowe Shoemaker to the podium. Stowe.
Thank you very much. Thank you for letting me come and speak. One of the best parts about getting old is you sort of do a lot of stuff, and then when they announce it, it makes it sound like you've had a successful career, but it's really just age and things start to add up. But it's really an honor to come and speak today to all of you. And what I want to talk about today is really, I'm kind of much more of a sort of I want to give you a framework on how to think about your business, how to think about marketing and how marketing's changed. So I'm not going to be presenting a lot of data about customers think this and customers think that, because every customer is a little different. You all have different customers in different segments. So it's much more a framework so that you can go home and begin to think about how you should maybe look at marketing your businesses. All my slides are available for you. So if you just bring up your card at the end, I'll send you the slides, so you don't have to be taking pictures of the slides or taking a lot of notes. Also, I've written a bunch of stuff. And if you're interested, I can send you a link of articles I've written on loyalty and pricing and all that kind of stuff. So today I'm going to talk about the future of marketing and really how we've gone from 4 Ps to 7 Ps, et cetera. I'm going to talk a little bit about how consumers make decisions and how that fits into customer loyalty. So let's start with how marketing has changed. When I first went to college, and probably when most of you went to college, you learned about the 4 Ps of marketing: price, product, promotion, and placement, kind of the ones we always think about. But then, what happened is we realized that products are very different than services. So we had to add 3 more Ps. So we added people, right? Because people deliver the services. We add the process, because we try to control the process to reduce variability. And then we also added the physical attributes to make things tangible so that they could, feel real. But what we realized is that, when we talk about 4 Ps and 7 Ps, we're missing the customer in there. So I wrote a couple textbooks. My textbooks really, though, I call them the Betamax of marketing textbooks. Remember Betamax was like the better technology but never got adopted? Those were kind of my textbooks. But in my textbooks, I talked about the 15 Cs of marketing. And you can see them on the screen. And what I've done is I've kind of put this on a grid. And what I would urge you to do when you get back to your organizations is kind of create a similar type grid for each of your different market segments and really begin to see, okay, how do we use these 15 Cs of marketing as part of our overall strategy? So the 15 Cs include, and I'm not, you can read them, but the critical one is the customer. And when we talk about 4 Ps and 7 Ps, we never really talk about customers. And the critical list is that all our customers are different, right? We don't just have one customer, we have multiple customers. So we want to take a look and say, okay, according to our different segments, who are those customers? And what are the categories of offerings, right? In our businesses, we don't just offer one product, we offer a variety of things, right? Because at the end of the day, customers come to our properties with lots of money, and our goal is to extract that money. So we provide a lot of categories of ways of things that they can buy. We also have to decide, what are the capabilities of our firm? What are we good at? Sometimes we shouldn't do things because we're not good at it, and it's really focusing on what are we really good at and how do we make sure that that is part of our overall offering. Some other things we want to talk about is the cost to the customer. That really comes down to the price. And what is the cost to the customer? Not just in terms of what they're buying for our product, but what the total cost, what it costs for them to arrive to our property, right? Their airfare, their transportation, all the things that customers have to think about. We talk a lot about customization, right? How do we customize our product or our service for those different types of segments? And I think the future of hospitality is this whole issue of customization. So we customize the different types of room categories. We customize certainly gaming experiences, okay? Another thing that we certainly talk about is customer measurement. And we do that all the time with lifetime value of the customer, recency, frequency, monetary value. All of that becomes how do we measure that customer, even in terms of satisfaction. The other thing is another one of these C's is the chain of relationships, right? Because we have different people in our business helping take care of the customer. A good example, and then we always have to think about how does that chain of relationship impact the business? So I went on vacation once with my wife to Hawaii, and we stayed at a hotel, the Hilton Hotel. And every day I went down to get coffee. And every day the coffee was cold. And I said to the person, how come the coffee's cold every day? Why don't you use the thermometer? And he goes, oh, well, we keep losing them, so our manager won't buy us a new thermometer. So I went to the GM of the hotel, and she said, how is everything, as GMs do, right? And I said, well, we have problems with the coffee. It's never hot. And she goes, yeah, we outsource that, so we don't have a lot of control. right? So you want to think about those chain of relationships. What's the impact? Because most of our customers don't know that there's somebody else. They think it's you. So you have to think about these relationships. Another thing is the capacity control. That's where we tie all revenue management in, okay? But capacity control is not just in terms of our rooms. It's how many two-tops do we have in our restaurants? How many four-tops? What's the gaming limit we put, right? How many tables do we have open or closed? And as you know, there's a lot of research being done. Is it better to have more tables open and less people at the table, or is it better to have more tables closed and more people at the table, right? So those kinds of things we think about in terms of capacity control. And then we also have to think about the chain of the channels of distribution. You know, how does that customer buy our product? So hopefully you're beginning to see that really 4 Ps didn't really cover it, 7 Ps, but there's really so much more to think about. And what I'd urge you to do when you go home is, again, create this kind of chart and then really lay out, okay, for this customer, what are we giving them? How much are we charging them? What's the costs for them? How are we measuring them? And then you begin to get a better understanding of the overall value and creating that marketing mix, okay? And how marketing has changed in relation to those 4 Ps, 7 Ps to the 15 Cs is this chart that's coming up right here. And what you'll notice is that on one side it's very tactical, the other side it's very strategic, and the profitability rises. So when I first entered the business 1,000 years ago, you know, everything was just sales. We just basically pushed the traffic. We didn't do a lot of targeting. There was very little measurement. It was just sell, sell, sell. You know, I started my career in sales. I called myself a marketing person because it sounded sexier. But really what I was doing was, you know, hospitality sales. But then we started to get smarter over time. We started doing more targeted promotions, right? We were still pushing out. We were doing a lot of discounts. And then, of course, frequency programs entered the market, right? And we'll talk about frequency programs a little later. But when we think about it, frequency programs are really price-driven, right? You do a bunch of things, we'll give you a bunch of things. So it's kind of a reward. And I would argue that many properties today are still kind of stuck in this frequency mentality. But as we move forward in marketing, we start thinking about how do we build the brand? You know, how do we build the brand of, you know, it's all about branding of our property. And how do we add value to our product to support the brand, right? And we'll talk about, when I talk later about loyalty and how we do that, it's a lot about branding. But the future, as we move to the far right, is the knowledge relationship, where we know so much about our customers that we can better take care of them and take care of their problems before they even know they have a problem. And I have the word VAR there, which is the value-added reseller, right? So we know so much about our value-added resellers that we're able to help them be better so then they can sell our product. Do you sort of see how this has changed? And if you looked at your business, how many of you feel you're really at that far end with the knowledge relationships? Okay? Well, I'm glad you all didn't raise your hand, because that means it's good that I'm speaking to you, so maybe you're learning something new. Or you're checking your email. But do you think how many of you are kind of still in the frequency mode? Okay, so what I want you to think about is how do we use all this data that we're collecting on our customers to move to totally knowing everything about them so that we can go back and customize every other offerings, okay? So I would argue that we use frequency programs as a way we're paying people to tell us when they're playing with us. Because if we know when they're playing with us, we can calculate their lifetime value, we can track their wants and needs, and then we can use all that information to eventually create the knowledge, right? And that's what I want you to think about in your organizations. go back to the 15 C's and figure out what am I doing to create a really strong, knowledgeable relationship. Because if you think about your own behavior, you always go to the places that know most about you and take care of your needs. And that's what we want, that's where I want you to move to as in marketing. Okay? Any questions at all? If you have questions, just raise your hands or write them down and we'll try to answer them right away. But that's where marketing is going. And we can't think about marketing, we can't think about the customer without understanding how the customer makes decisions. And and this is what I want to focus on right now, is this kind of the consumer purchase model. Because you'll notice in the center of the model is loyalty, the loyalty circle. And that's what I'm going to, we'll be focusing on a lot in my talk, is how do we create overall loyalty? But in order to create loyalty, we have to get the customer first into our property, okay? And the way to think about this model is customers first begin to have a need or they have a problem that needs to be solved, okay? And I think the important thing to remember is customers don't necessarily know what their needs are or their wants are, but they know what their problems are, okay? And if we can begin to think about it, how do we solve their problems? Okay, once they understand they have a need or they have a problem to be solved, then they start to go out and search for our product or for the company that will solve their problem. And that's where we talk about the awareness set, the evoke set, and the search set. And basically, if you think about it this way, if I think about places you could go for lunch. Think about yourself at work and say, where are some places I could go for lunch? That becomes your consideration set, because you just sort of think about all those brands. Then you narrow it down, and that becomes your choice set. And then from your choice set is your final choice, okay? But before you make that final choice, there's barriers to that purchase, right? And as I have on this chart, there's the switching cost, right? So if you're a member of a loyalty program, anytime you don't use that company where you have that loyalty program, you lose points. So a good example is I fly United Airlines all the time. And every time I don't fly United, I'm thinking I'm missing that opportunity to earn all those free miles to be treated like a bigwig. And so I changed my behavior for that. And that's essentially what we do in our business, right? We have members become members of our programs, and we don't want them to go elsewhere. But there's also the perceived risk, right? And understanding what these risks are for a person buying from using our product or our service, okay? And there's a lot of types of risks. There's the social risk. Gee, if my friends know I'm gambling, right? There's the financial risk of I really can't afford to go spend that kind of money. I think I'll do something else with my money. So understanding what those risks are, and then in our communication strategy, reducing those risks. Once we get through the barriers, they try us. Then if they like us, we can start using the loyalty circle, which we'll talk about. If they become dissatisfied, they'll switch. But if they become dissatisfied and they tell us about their dissatisfaction, then we have the opportunity to create a loyal customer and eventually a brand advocate. So when you're thinking about your customers, think about them going through this purchase cycle. And the three that are the most critical, of course, are the need, the awareness, and the barriers. And as you can see on this slide here, I have all the things that we use from a marketing standpoint to create the awareness, create the need, reduce the risk, etc. So hopefully this gives you a sense of taking a look at our customer from the time they start thinking about buying from us all the way through from the time they leave, and how do we then begin to market. And if if you have marketing people work for you, or if you have advertising people work for you, the critical question is take this chart with you, and when they come up with this cool promotion, right, because they always come up with these cool things for you to spend money on, ask them, okay, if we do X tactic, which you recommend, how is that going to help move the customer through the buying model? How is it going to reduce the risk? How is it going to create the awareness? All those kinds of things. So I want you to begin to think kind of strategically about all the ideas that people come up with, okay? Because everybody has an idea, but then think about how will this idea move the customer through the buying model, okay? So this becomes important, this part right here. When we talk about needs and problems, a few minutes ago I mentioned that customers don't know what they need or what they want, but they know what their problems are. And probably the most classic article ever written was an article called Marketing Myopia, and it was written by Theodore Levitt at Harvard Business School. And basically in that article, Levitt talked about the fact that people don't buy quarter-inch drill bits, they buy quarter-inch holes, okay? So when we go out and buy a drill bit, we're not buying a drill bit, we're really buying a hole, okay? People don't buy insurance, but they're really buying protection, okay? Charles Revlon, the cosmetics maker, in what's, I would admit this is kind of a sexist comment. He said, on the factory floor, I make cosmetics. In the department stores, I sell hope, okay? And what we want to think about is, what is the customer really buying from us, right? That we're selling gambling, we're selling entertainment, we're selling all these things, but what is the customer really buying from us? And if we can understand that, if we can understand what their problems are, then we can come up with really cool solutions to solve those problems. Okay. So that's what I wanted to kind of talk about in terms of the overall, how marketing's changed, how we have to use marketing to move the customer through the buying process. Once they come to our property, now we have the opportunity to create customer loyalty. And that's where I'm going to spend the rest of my time on. Are there any questions from what I've discussed so far? None? Okay. Interesting. Is it getting you to think about some different things, hopefully? So customer loyalty. If we think about it, frequency focuses on behavior, okay? So if we think about frequency, when a customer gives you a greater share of their transactions than they might have without a program. So basically what we're doing here, and this is what we all do, you spend so much money, we let you go to the buffet first, we let you buy a whole bunch of things. And the question that we always have to ask, well, isn't that loyalty? I mean, they're coming to us all the time, they're spending all their money. And here's a commercial I want you to look at that really describes this frequency. Now, think about some of those words in that commercial. Allows you to collect points faster, right? How many of us do, Tuesdays 3 points more, right? Faster, earn more rewards than our competitors, right? So basically, it was talking all about how we will give you more if you're a member of our program. Well, if you're the president of Nectar, what's the thing that keeps you awake at night? I mean, probably nothing because you're the president of Nectar, right? But what would keep me awake is, what if somebody comes out and says, we're sweeter than Nectar? We give you more points, right? So I wrote a case study that we published at Harvard Business School on Hilton Honors. I can't give you that copy because Harvard copyrights everything. But at the time we wrote that case, it was right when Starwood came out. You probably remember Starwood came out with their Promise program. And I remember talking to the head of Hilton who ran their loyalty program. And he said, we're really only as dumb as our stupidest competitor. Because basically, with frequency, if we're not careful, we just keep driving everything to the bottom because we keep giving more and more and more to the customer. And we're really not just taking more share, but we're just giving more away. And I think that's what we have to be careful with frequency programs. And that ad for Nectar really just talked about, we'll give you more and more and more, but that's easily copied. Instead, I want you to think about loyalty. And loyalty, unlike frequency, focuses on emotion, okay? So when the customer feels so strongly that you can best meet his or her relative needs, that they don't even think about the competition, and they think about it, this is my hotel, this is my casino, this is my restaurant. And they totally believe that you're taking care of them, right? And so we're winning the maximum share of the heart, the mind, and the wallet because we have an emotional bond with that organization. And think about your own behavior. You get probably a lot of flyers in the mail for things, right? Do you ignore a lot of them if you're loyal to one company? Like I have a hairstylist. They're called hairstylists now. They used to be called barbers. I get all these advertisements to get my hair cut. But I just throw them away because I'm loyal to my stylist. Now, unfortunately, she's not loyal to me because I don't have much hair to cut, so she doesn't make any money, so she's going to fire me. But if you think about it, we always ignore things that we're not loyal to. So we want to create that same loyalty. And here's an example of loyalty. Now, this doesn't mean that our customers are all dogs. But listen to the words that were in there. Trust, love, honesty, right? Wouldn't it be wonderful if our customers thought about us that way? That we showed trust, we showed love, we showed honesty? And now all of a sudden we're do you see how different that is than the Nectar commercial that I showed? It's totally moving us away from frequency to much more the emotional bond, okay? And again, what I would argue is that we use frequency programs so that we can understand our customers' needs, their wants, their behavior. We can then begin to customize their stay and show them trust, loyalty, honesty. If we don't know who they are, it's hard to focus on that, right? But if we know who they are, we can do all that. So what I would urge you to always think about is, don't look at your programs that you're running at your hotels and casinos as just a way to drive more behavior by giving offers, but totally understand what that data is telling us about the behavior of our customers, and then how do we go back to the 15C of customization and customize that offer, that relationship with that person, and begin to build that emotional bond, okay? So that gets us to, well, how do we create loyalty? That's all great, you know, how do we create loyalty? So over the years, I've done a lot of work, obviously in loyalty, and worked with a lot of hotel companies around the world. And the model that I talk about at length is what I call the loyalty circle. And that's how I'm going to talk about this now. But the loyalty circle, there's 3 components to the loyalty circle, as you can see. There's the process, there's the value, and the communication. And I call this a circle because you'll notice that the customer can exit the relationship anytime. So we can be great about the process, but if we do something else wrong, we've totally destroyed loyalty. And I'll give you an example. I have a favorite resort that I take my wife to all the time, because we all know that if we to have a happy life, we have to have a happy wife. And I take my wife to this resort all the time, and we had booked our reservation like a month, maybe 2 months in advance. A month before our arrival, now this is a hotel I'd gone to all the time. I knew the staff, I just felt so loyal to them. About a month before we arrive, I get a letter from them with my name spelled wrong, inviting me to come to the resort, and they will give me a 2-for-1 spa package if I come during a certain time period. Well, I've already planned to come during that same time period. They spelled my name wrong, they didn't know why I was arriving, and I felt, gee, maybe they don't love me as much as I love them. So suddenly, all this loyalty I had for them had been totally destroyed. And if they had sent me a note and said, "Dear Dr. Shoemaker, we're so excited you and Martha are coming back," use my wife's name, "we want to give you a 2-for-1 spa package," right? Now, all of a sudden, it's the same offer, right? But it's a totally different relationship. And so I was friends with the general manager, and I said, "Gee, you know, I got this letter, I was really disappointed." And he goes, "Yeah, you know, I'm not surprised. We outsource our database to a third party, and they do all our marketing," right? And so we totally destroyed that relationship. So the key thing about the loyalty circle is we can have the greatest communication strategy in the world, but if we're not, or we can have the greatest processes in the world, but if we're not communicating properly, we destroy that loyalty. Okay, so I'm going to talk about each of these in detail. So the first is the process. The process is everything that happens from the time our guest begins to think about buying from us to the time they leave. And if you happen to be in HR, you can use this same model, the loyalty circle, to think about how do we keep and retain staff. So we did a project for MGM Resorts where we helped them, we used the loyalty circle, looking at how do they recruit management trainees. And I can send you that article if you want that. But we're talking about it here from the customer perspective, but I want you to also think, if you're in HR, that you can use the same model for retention of staff. So the process, everything that happens from the time the customer begins to buy from us to the time they leave. And when we think about the process of a service, there's 4 kind of components. There's the physical product, which is what the customer actually touches and feels. That makes the product tangible, right? We all stayed at the Marriott last night. We had those big white linen, you know, really comfortable beds. They were all white. That made it tangible that the room must be clean because they gave us white linens, right? Big fluffy pillows. Must be an expensive hotel because we had big towels, right? That's that physical product that they can touch and feel. The other part is the service product. The service product is what the customer's actually buying from us. So when they go to check in at the front desk, that's the service product. The service delivery is how our staff delivers what the customer's actually buying. And the 4th component is the service environment. Okay? So when we think about services, again, what makes them different from products is they're intangible. We have simultaneous production and consumption, right? We have a lot of heterogeneity, which is obviously one day the staff member can be really nice, the next day they can be not so nice. So in the service product, we have to think about what is the customer buying from us? What are the steps they're going through to buy our product? Pulling up to the front desk or pulling up into the porte-cochere to park their car, walking into the hotel, going to the front desk. Those are all the steps they go through to buy from us. The service delivery then is, okay, how do we respond to that? And that's where we put in a lot of service scripts, right? To kind of reduce that heterogeneity, to kind of control the process of the purchase. Excuse me. And then we have the service environment, which is a way to help create the atmosphere that we want. It's obviously the use of colors, the use of sound, the use of smells, all to create that wonderful service environment. So that's all the parts of the service product. And so as you go back to your hotels and your casinos and you're working with your staff, really begin to think about what is that physical product? What's that service product? What are all these different components? How are we using them to, again, to create a great relationship with our customer? Okay? And if you take this back to the 15 C's, then you'll say, okay, well, maybe this type of customer is going to have a very different service delivery or a service product versus another customer. And then we begin to do some customization. Okay? So we talk a lot about in services, we always talk about exceeding customers' expectations. How many of you heard that? We always want to exceed customers' expectations. Well, what happens when we always want to exceed customers' expectations? We keep raising the bar. I tell this story a lot. When I was first married, I was in the hotel business. Every night, I turned down my wife's bed. Turned it down, turned the light on, put a little mint on the pillow, a little basket for her laundry, some slippers, made it very nice. A couple of months into the marriage, I got really busy. I didn't do this turn down. I hear this screaming, Stowe, Stowe. I go running down to my wife, what's wrong, what's wrong? And she was like, where's my turn down? Because she'd begun to expect it. So when I got married the second time and my wife said, what do you do? I wouldn't tell her. But what we do, in all seriousness, is by exceeding customers' expectations, we keep raising the bar. Actually, I've only been married once. I've been very lucky. Those prenups are just killers. But we keep raising the bar. So the question that I just want you to see by this chart, you can see that if we meet customers' expectations, that's just as good as exceeding their expectations, right? But we don't have to keep raising the bar, raising our costs. So always think about how do we understand them, how do we meet their customer expectations, and we can keep them just as happy. And so when I did my PhD at Cornell, I really looked at how were expectations formed. And if you're interested, I have an article on that, on what we call scripts and schema, which is how we learn. Okay, so when we think about the process, what I want you to think about, the takeaway, is not that we always have to exceed customers' expectations, but we have to understand what they are and then make sure we meet them. So there's a famous thing in marketing called the gap model of service quality, which helps us understand where service failures occur. And again, all this fits into the process. So the first kind of gap really is all about what we think the customer wants versus what the customer actually wants are very different, okay? The second gap occurs when we know what the customer wants, but we design the service standards to make it easy for us as operators, right? So my coworker today went down to Starbucks at 6:30 at the Marriott, and she said, I'm dying for a cup of coffee. And they said, oh, I'm sorry, we're not open till 7. And my friend said, well, your coffee's there. I see it. It's there. Can't I have some? She goes, no, we're not open till 7 because we can't get the registers to work till 7. So we have no way to charge you, right? So my friend said, I'll leave you my credit card and you just charge it at 7 when they start working. And they said, no, I'm sorry, we're not open till 7, right? So think about that. How many times in our organizations have we put in processes that we think work great for us, but really mess up the customer? So what I'd like you to do is take out a piece of paper and pencil, and we'll do this quickly. I'd like you to complete the exercise. There's 12 questions I'm going to ask you. And give it a 1 if it means it's very true. 5 means it's very untrue. Okay? So, somewhat true, not applicable, etc. So take a look at these first 6 questions. And what I want you to do is rate it on a 1 to 5, where again, 1 means very true, 5 means very untrue. So just take a look at those 6 questions and write down 1 through 5. And then I'm going to give you another 6 questions. There's some good questions here. Policies exist for the convenience of the organization, not the customer. Number 5, service policies seem arbitrarily. Okay? And again, the scale is 1 very true, somewhat true, not applicable, somewhat untrue, very untrue. Everybody got the 6 questions done? Okay, I'll give you another minute. And you're not going to be graded on this, so be honest. And what I want you to do, I'd love it if you came up and gave me your card and I sent you these notes. And even if you just want to be nice, you can leave your card off, and then when you get my email, you can just delete it. But what I'd like you to do really is I'd like you to give this exercise to your staff, right? Take this and give each department in your organization these 12 questions and see how each department thinks about the business, right? And I've done this a lot around the world, and what you'll find is that each department thinks very differently. And obviously they should think the same. Okay, so now take the next 6 questions, still using the same scale. Again, you're using a 1 to 5 scale. And then when you get all your 12 questions then add up the scores. Okay, so if you're quick and you've done all 12, then just add up the scores. Okay, everybody pretty much finished? So, how many of you had scores from 12 to 21? Okay, how many people are lying? How many people had 22 to 31? Okay. What about 32 to 41? Okay. 42 to 51? And then 52 to 60. Okay, so it seems like there's some opportunity to think about this. Now, what I've done is, if you want my notes, I've taken those questions and I've rewritten them so that you could give to your customers. Okay? So for example, here I say, the hotel does not know what the guests want. Policies exist for the convenience of the organization, not for the customer. So what I'd like you to do, if you ask for a copy of my notes, again, go back, give each of these 12 questions to each department, come up with some scores, then survey your customers, ask them the 12 questions, and then go back and begin to see, okay, how do we think about how well we're doing for our customers? And then how well do our customers actually think we're doing? And then go back and then take a look at the 13 C's and say, okay, where can we improve the service relationship? Where are some of the service gaps occurring? Okay, so I've rewritten these 12 questions as from the customer's perspective. Okay, gap 3, so that's gap 2 we just talked about. Gap 3 occurs when we know what the customer wants, we've designed the right service standards, but then we haven't hired the right person to deliver those service standards. Okay, and that gets into the whole area of HR. Gap 4 occurs when what we promise the guest in our advertising and our communication, and then what we actually deliver is very different. So whenever I go to a hotel, the first thing I do is I go down to the pool to see all the beautiful people, right? Because there's only beautiful people hanging out at the pool, right? And I look around and there's just like a bunch of old guys like me looking for all the beautiful people, right? Or when I check into a hotel, I always say, I'd like the room I saw in your brochure, right? So we have to be very careful in terms of our communication and our advertising. Are we communicating what's proper or what we truly have? And then the final gap is that if we deliver everything perfectly, but the guest doesn't know it, okay? That's one area. And if we close off all the gaps, then we're more likely to meet their expectations. So what I'd like you to think about is go through, you all have complaint procedures in place for handling complaints. Guests send you their complaints. What I'd like you to do is begin to categorize those in terms of, okay, these are what customers are saying, these are where we're having service failures. Let's see if we can identify what gap they fit into, and then let's go back and see how we can, again, close that gap. Okay, and again, this is all part of the process of creating loyalty. Okay, the second part of creating loyalty is value added. How do we add value to their stay? And if there's value, if we have a service failure, how do we recover from that? So when we think about value and we think about rewards, there's kind of two types of rewards you can think about. There's kind of the aspirational awards. You know, it's a trip I would not buy, but I'd love to go on anyway, something I aspire to, versus necessity awards. You know, money for gasoline, all those kinds of things. So if you're thinking about your loyalty program and you're saying, do we add value to it? Think about it, are these rewards we're giving away, are they more aspirational or are they necessity? And some people will prefer the necessity awards. Others might want the aspirational. That goes back to, again, customization of our programs. So value, there's a lot of components of value. 3 of them are the financial value, the temporal value, and the functional value. So when we think about financial value, you can read the list that I have here. All of these relate to how we think about value from a financial perspective. If it's easily substitutable, then I'm going to be more price sensitive, right? But the more unique it is, I'm willing to spend a little more because I think it's unique. You know, what's the end benefit I'm getting is going to relate to overall value. Wow, I spent a lot of money, but it was a great vacation. I really rested, so I didn't mind spending that money. But did it seem fair? For what I paid and what I got, was it fair? All of that impacts our financial, how we think about value. So, you know, on your questions that you ask your customers, you know, overall, how would you rate the price value of your visit? and then start to, if you find they have an overall poor price value, then ask some questions that relate to some of these areas and see if you can tease out why they have an overall poor price value. Functional value. Okay, temporal value means saving time. Okay, so the temporal value all is about saving time. And that's the whole reason, you love being in the loyalty programs, because you can save time at the buffet, you can save time checking in, all those kinds of things, because time is money, right? But the functional value really relates to, does the product or service do what it's supposed to do, okay? And if we think of quality, how do you determine quality with something like a service which is intangible? Well, research has shown that the way we determine quality and functional value is what we call the rater system, which is reliability, assurance, tangible, empathy, and responsiveness. And so the idea here, remember we talked about the 4 components of the service, and we talked about the service delivery? What we want to do is in every part of the service delivery, we want to make sure we show some reliability, we show some tangibleness, we show some empathy, etc. So here's an example. I was in Dubai doing some work, and I went to pay my restaurant bill, went for my wallet, and my wallet was gone. Okay, so I had nothing on me, and so I went to this hotel. I was going to meet with the GM later, but no one knew who I was when I was there. I went down and I talked to the concierge. And basically, the concierge, in a very subtle way, showed me that he was giving me great service by focusing on the rater system. So in terms of reliability, he said, hey, there's cameras all around Dubai, so we'll look and see where you got in the taxi, look where you got off. We'll be able to identify the taxi cab, and it made me feel like he was right on top of things. He assured me. He did assurance by 2 things. He said, I have a good friend at Jumeirah Beach where I started, and he would call him. But the second thing he never did is he never said, are you staying at the hotel? Right? Because if he had said, oh, are you staying here? I would immediately thought, oh my God, he's not going to help me because I'm not staying here. He never asked me that. So he assured me that he was going to take care. To make it tangible, he gave me his business card with his cell phone and said, let me call you. In terms of empathy, he said, don't worry about it. You're not the stupidest American we've had here before. He talked about how people had lost stuff before and they always found it. So he didn't make me feel bad about it. And as we were responsive, that he kept me very much engaged in terms of where we were. And eventually we found that I'd left it in a taxi cab. But all of that showed really good service delivery. And if you think about this in terms of room service, right? How do we show reliability in room service? It's now 10 o'clock, your food will be there by 10:15. And then when they come at 10:15, you go, oh my God, it was amazing. They came when they said they were going to come. Typically, we say your food will be ready in 20 minutes. How many of you actually look at your watch to see what time it is that you called? And then you sit there paralyzed, right? You're afraid to get in the shower, afraid to get on the call, because what if they come? And it just seems like forever, right? How many times do they repeat your order to ensure when they deliver? So think about the room service, responsiveness, right? And tangible. How many of you looked at the menu of a room service and you can see what the person who stayed in the room ordered last time because they've circled all the things, right? So that doesn't make you want to order room service. Makes you question, why are you spending more for room service than if you went down to the restaurant? So what I want you to think about is use this rater system to create the sense of functional value and of great quality to show the guests that they're getting great service, right? Because if you don't let the guests know they're getting great service in a very subtle way, they're not going to be sure they're getting it. So that's the functional value. But there's also the emotional, psychological value, experiential. All of these relate to, everybody's talking about how do we create great experiences, okay? The social is, when friends are together. When I started in the hotel business, we used to have the captain's table. And that was for all the single travelers who would all eat together, right? But you notice now what's happening in hotels, they're creating the whole lot at lobbies now are becoming places where people just hang out. No one wants to be in their room anymore. So what are we doing to create social environments where people can naturally come together in safe kind of environments? How do we show that the organization is trustworthy, that our employees are trustworthy, okay? And then, again, how do we identification with the organization? All of those provide great value, for the customer. And when we talk about identification with the organization, just think of your favorite sports team. How many of you wear all their gear? And you want to feel proud that you're part of that organization. So when you're thinking about how do we add value, don't think about the financial value, but really focus on all these other types of value that make people feel they're having a great stay. Okay, we also have value recovery if we have a service failure. And probably most of you are asking this one question, and if you're not, you should. Please indicate if you reported any problems during your visit and how they were resolved. One question, 4 answers. 1, no problems experienced. 2, had a problem, reported it and it was resolved in a friendly manner. 3, experienced a problem but didn't report to the staff. Problems reported and were not resolved in a friendly manner. With that one question, then you can create this problem impact tree. And so this data was actually from a casino that I worked with. And I talked to the marketing people and they said, oh, we never have any complaints here. There's no problems. We do a great job here. And what we found when we actually asked this question to a couple thousand people, we found that 13% of the people experienced a problem when they were on the property. Of the 13% who experienced a problem, 31% never reported it. Approximately 69 did report it. Of those who reported it, 26% said it was not resolved in a friendly manner, okay? And you can compare the answers to this question with the overall likelihood to recommend, likelihood for satisfaction, and it gives you a good understanding of what your customers are actually thinking, okay? So that's value-added value recovery. The final part of the loyalty circle is communication, okay? And how are we communicating with our guests? And how are we creating ways for customers to talk about us? And we only have a few more minutes left. So here, watch this ad. Yeah, and the whole point of that commercial is, they're just obviously promoting to them, but they're not listening in return. And what I encourage you to do is think about, we got all this data on our customers because of our frequency programs. Let's listen and begin to communicate. And how we communicate, there's a great book you should read. It's a very simple book by this guy from University of Pennsylvania on contagious and why things catch on. And he talks about, social currency, having things that people don't know that they have to sort of find out about so that they become in the know. Like in the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas, there's this place called the Secret Pizza. And you sort of have to know where it is to find it. There's no advertising for it. And everybody goes, let's go to Secret Pizza. I know where it is. Makes me feel like I really know something. A trigger is really like when I say, when you think about Coca-Cola, you think of polar bears, right? So what are we doing in our advertising that triggers our brand, ties our brand with something that gets us thinking about it? It's like we always win there. Like Stations Casinos does a lot of advertising where they show pictures of people winning, so you just assume our people are winning. How do we create those emotions why people are on the property? How do we do things that are public? And what I mean by that is, what always bugs me when I go to a hotel and they sell postcards of the hotel, right? I mean, that's the most ridiculous thing in the world, right? Because when you get a postcard, what do? You send it to somebody and you say, I've stayed here, right? But when they charge 50 cents for a postcard or they don't have stamps, this is a beautiful way to do free advertising. What are the practical values of using our product or service, and what are the stories we're trying to create? And this book kind of goes through each of those in detail, and it's a great way to create communication and get people talking about your brand and your property in a way that makes it good. So what did we talk about today? We talked about the loyalty circle. And we want to measure, these are just some of the standard things we do to measure loyalty. Most of them you're doing automatically. Traditional ways, recency, frequency, monetary value, what's the score of their behavior, we look at lifetime value, all those kinds of things. So the topics that we covered was why and how marketing has changed from the 4 Ps to the 14 Cs. We talked about the consumer buying model, starting off with needs, awareness, going all the way through loyalty. And then I gave you a framework for talking about loyalty. So hopefully you found it worth your time over breakfast to sit and listen to me. Again, if you're interested in my slides, you can leave me your card, or I can check with Paul and see if there's a way we can just sort of put it online for everybody. But I do have a bunch of articles that I wrote on loyalty, the loyalty circle in more detail, and things like that, which I'm happy to send the link and you can download them. And I've done a bunch of stuff on pricing also, if you're interested in revenue management and sort of pricing strategies. So thank you for spending time with me. I hope you found it an hour well spent. So thank you. And I'm here to answer any questions. It was okay.
It was great.